Hello, everyone. Welcome to our Julio live session, last one of the year. I am Regiane Lavelli, Sales Director for Julio. Joining me today is Victor Lima, Director of Digital Practices at Diamond Schmitt, a global architecture firm from Canada. Victor is a highly skilled and experienced professional holding a degree in civil engineering technology and an advanced diploma in architectural technology. Victor's career has been distinguished by his involvement in diverse projects, including transit, institutional, and residential mixed use buildings. Hi, Victor. It's a pleasure to have you here with me today. How are you?
Hello, I'm doing well. It's a pleasure to be here as well. Very excited for talking a little bit about virtual reality architecture and how we can make our amazing designs a little bit more usable and understandable.
Oh, brilliant. Yeah, so let's talk about virtual reality in architecture then. Let's start with a basic question. How long have you been using VR presentations at Diamond Schmidt?
We've been using for pretty much close to 10 years now. I think we were one of the first architecture firms here in Canada to leverage the technology and see the benefits that it would bring with it. So it's been quite a bit of time, and it's been quite a nice journey to go through and see the advancements as well that has been happening on this area.
Nice. And what's the impact of VR presentations on your projects?
I think VR it has various impacts. Like I'll probably say minimum three that I can go through. Like the first one will probably be on a client relationship. So a lot of the time, clients they can't really understand that well 2D. Even with renders and so forth, it's really hard for them to understand scale, materiality. So using VR to be able to showcase a specific design feature that we're trying to sell or material that we wanted to use has been quite helpful to getting immersed, understand proportions, understand materiality, and get them to just give the thumbs up so we can continue design. I think the second one would be more internally, which is a lot to do with how can we understand materiality and proportions before we even get to the client, right? Like we have internal design presentations, we have office design presentations to really get into how we are doing our designs before it actually gets presented to clients. So we've been using quite a bit for this aspect as well. And I think the third one is getting more and more into the healthcare industry, which when we are designing projects or hospitals in general or operation rooms, um, how is the design currently aligning with the necessity of the nurses, the doctors, and where the equipments are located? And that has been quite a big success because instead of waiting everything to be on site and start having to do modifications, they're able to do it during design and understand where equipments are, where is the operation table, and so forth, and make sure that they have the proper spacing, proper areas around to maneuver and to walk. So I'll probably say those are the main three features that we've been leveraging VR for so far.
That's great. And could you give us an example of a typical workflow that you use for creating these presentations for your clients?
Yeah, I think we like a typical one would be we are more over Revit company. So most of our projects we go from Revit into a rendering platform. So that would depend a little bit either from um, Enscape or Twinmotion, depends the familiarity that people have with the platform itself. Through those, we create 360 images, or we even do walkthroughs itself. And based on that, we export the images or the walkthroughs, and we actually import that into Julio. And out of the Julio platform, we generally define within the floor plans where each 360 is related to, so you can create that storytelling and how you wanted the clients to look around. And and we share that information either if they are in person in the office or if they are on their own office with a QR code or something, so they can walk through with us and understand the proportions and the space itself.
Nice. And who on your team is involved in creating the VR presentations?
So a lot of the times it's a collaboration between the architectural staff, so the people that actually work on the project, our BIM team, and our visualization team. So
Mhm.
we all come together to support each other and be able to develop that workflow and be able to deliver what we need to a certain standards that we have and ensure that we are aligning with that as well.
Right. And at what project stage do you most use VR presentations? Would it be at the beginning or more at the end when everything is more or less decided? How that works for you?
I think it's very spread across the overall design process, and that depends a little bit on what we're trying to achieve. Sometimes we start right at the beginning to get an overall idea of massing, so they can understand proportions or if how big it is. If we're dealing with a project where we are working on a residential neighborhood that it's coming our first or second high rise, so they can understand proportions. And when we do community meetings, so they can understand as well how it's going to look before it further develops on a massing perspective. Overall, say other parts comes down to on the design development stage where we are really getting to materiality and how that gets applied and defining, uh, fine tuning the design, making sure that we have the right features, the right um, proportions around. And the third one on the CD, we use quite a bit when it comes to healthcare or academic buildings where donations come quite handy from the client side to actually promote the building. And a
Mhm.
lot of the times they actually have those discussions with the donors leveraging VR so we could show like, oh, how is your name going to look on the wall if you donate this amount of money or those type of things. So we start getting a little bit as well so they can see what it could be if they agree to support the project at the end of the day. So I think it's a little mix of that.
Nice. And getting more into the client reactions, on your side, you said you've been using VR for, nearly 10 years. So how was the first reactions when you first used VR with clients, how was that? Did you use headset or how was the presentation? Any comments on any nice experience or bad experience that you had?
I think the technology has evolved quite a bit. At the beginning, we had to create a pretty massive setup, like overall sensors around the room, bring them in. I'll probably say most of the time we actually use a VR headset, and really making sure that people could walk around and see what they needed to see. With the evolution of the technology, we don't need to spend that much time and effort to set up the room for VR. Is literally just a plug and go type of thing, and
Nice.
getting the clients to come put the goggles on. Sometimes at the beginning, until they understand what it is, they might be a little afraid of putting that. Like some people um, didn't have good experiences with VR in the past, and sometimes they get dizzy or um, those are some of the things that we have to work around to make sure that people feel comfortable putting the VR. Um, we had clients in the past that they were quite resistant to put the goggles on, and they kind of voluntold someone from their group to be the person to put the goggles, and they could see on the screen that were just broadcasting or streaming what the person
Mhm.
was seeing. And I'll probably say once the person finished it up and took the goggles off, they were like, "Oh, this is amazing!" And everyone else
Yeah,
wanted to also put the
there you
goggles
go.
on. Uh, so it's really trying to break that barrier and make sure that you have a good setup to support. the experience. It's not
Yeah.
really the greatest when you have a very tight room that people can't really walk around and can bump into things.
Yeah.
Um, but at the end of the day, it's really just trying to encourage as much as you can. And I know after COVID, some people were quite reluctant to use goggles, but it's just really go over like the cleaning processes and make sure that they understand that you have protocols and so forth in relation to how you clean the goggles and you clean between people as well. So
Yeah, that's good. Have you ever had a client make a surprising decision, because of what they saw in VR? So beforehand, they had seen, renders or, 3D photos, models, but then after seeing VR, everything, it was a surprise for you. Anything on those lines that you'd
I
like to
think
share
I
with
think we have like two experiences. I will probably share one that is good and one that it didn't turn out too good. I'll probably say I'll start with the one that didn't go as good. On the renders, we will always have a lot of quick renderings like Enscape, trying to very quickly get those discussions around so they can better understand the design idea. And on the renders per se, it was looking pretty nice overall. Like the building facade, overall spacing of the mullions and so forth was creating kind of a connection with the external and the surrounding community. Once we
Mhm.
start actually getting to the VR and show them how we will look from the inside, their reaction was very, "Oh, I don't like this."
There you go.
Uh, so, and I think that was a part like, okay, so what can we do, right? And can we make the spacing bigger, or can we remove every other mullions that we had? So it actually
Mhm.
got into some discussions on how we can improve or make it um, acceptable from a design perspective to move along with that. Um, I'll probably say that was like a very interesting one because we were not expecting that reaction, and
There you
um,
go. Yeah.
we were like,
But
okay,
it
so
was it was good to have them, experience that beforehand, before going to construction and things like that, isn't it?
exactly,
Yeah.
yeah, it's a lot easier to change before than waiting
Exactly.
until things are already on site.
Yeah, for sure. For sure.
And I think the other one was when we were trying to um, define overall theme depth for like natural shading on facades and really defining how deep we would go. From the renderings standpoint, they were not really sold that the proposals they were putting were actually nice or it was working with the overall facade of the building. And once we actually brought them into VR and understand shading, we could actually, because on the VR, depending on how you do, you can define different times of day and so forth, and understand how the fins were affecting the overall facade.
Mhm.
They ended up agreeing with what we had and moving forward with the design. So I think it's always having an open mind. Sometimes you might get what you're looking for. Sometimes you might figure something out that you were not expecting. So it's being a very interesting process.
Yeah. With that in mind, what would you say that the biggest difference is in the quality of conversation with your client when you are using VR, presenting with VR?
Yeah, I think the it incites a lot more discussion because they can better understand volume. And I think
Mhm.
the part this is one of the biggest parts that sometimes people don't understand, even from renderings, is how do you feel on the space, right? Like you can see a render, you can put a small little person on your render that maybe from the render it shows like a tiny ant in the middle of the big atrium space, if we call it that way. But once you put the goggles on, you can actually feel the wall effect. Either if it's
Mhm.
like it's really big, we need to bring it down, or it's like, whoa, this is what I'm looking for. So it just makes the process and the decisions a lot easier, and we can have some easy agreements and moving on the design than just having to be doing multiple renders or sketches.
Yeah,
elevations and so forth. Yeah.
brilliant. Right. I would like to talk about a little bit about implementation. What was the main challenge for you, yeah, over the years to implement VR in terms of training, costs involved, and even your team, the adoption of the team, how they behaved. If you could talk about a little bit about that, please.
Sure. Yeah, yeah. I think like it started as a pretty big investment at the beginning, like 10 years ago. The headsets and the equipment to support VR, they were quite expensive at the time. But as things progress, and nowadays it's actually very affordable, unless you're trying to go with the Apple Vision, which is a little bit
Yeah,
outside
true.
of a lot of people. But in general, if you're trying to go on the Meta Quests or so far as like it's $300, $400, you can get a headset, and
Mhm.
it's pretty easy because you don't need anything else other than that. That's all you need because you just can plug it into your computer, or you can just put on the cloud and use within the headset cloud itself, and that's all you need to jump in. But it comes down as well on how people understand the process. I think in general, the simplification of the process has happened quite a bit. Before, it was a lot of hoops that we have to actually go through to get the information into the headset. Nowadays, pretty much is you take your 360 renders that you do on your typical rendering platform, drag and drop. We use Ulio, so we drag and drop into the Ulio platform, and that's already available within the VR headset to use. So because the process got so simplified, people don't really have that much drawbacks on it. It's quite intuitive. It's very easy to go through. Um, I'll probably say the part that becomes a little bit tricky if you're trying to do walkthroughs itself, like live walkthroughs. I think that requires a lot more computer power and a great connection between the headset and the computer that you have, because you're not going to be able to run that in the headset itself. Um,
Mhm.
so it might become choppy if you don't have the right hardware for that.
Mhm.
Uh, but in general, we don't want people to be really walking around the building. We wanted them very specific places. So that part we can tailor the story that we're trying to tell instead of just giving free reign to everything. Um,
Yeah, nice. Yeah. And why have you chosen Ulium as your VR presentation tool? And what do you like the most about it?
yeah, I think like at the beginning we had mainly 360 photos, which is very like choppy, if we call it that way. If you're trying to show multiple rooms, you would just export 360 photos, give it to the client. They could see in their VR headsets without any story that you wanted to tell. So we started looking around how can we set up what we wanted to tell, how we wanted to tell, and that's where we start looking around on platforms to support that process of developing a path to get to what we're trying to show. Sometimes
Mhm.
it's what is the feeling from exterior into interior, or from the atrial into a specific location in the building. So to create that with the tools that we were using before, it would take a lot of time and effort. And as we start figuring it out when found Ulio in the market, was to it's a very easy, quick drag and drop. And as we upload our plans into the platform, we can just define what is the order that we want our um, views to align with, and then people can just go and walk towards those different views that we have, and that way it just creates a very streamlined process and approach for them to go over the story that we put together and how we wanted them to experience. It all comes down to controlling a little bit the storytelling and not letting
Mhm.
people go tangent. So it's a good way of creating that. And Yulia has been uh, quite easy to use. It's very simple, user friendly, and um, even there were quite a few changes now on how views are content and the licensing itself, which made even better on how it was before. So that part, it's ever evolving, and I think the technology has been maturing quite nicely lately as well.
Brilliant. And how do you see, Victor, the use of VR in the future for architectural practices? We talked about, all, how everything has been evolving over the past 10 years. How do you see the next 10 years from now?
I think the next 10 years, it's going to be quite interesting. It's going to come down to, I'll probably say, the goggles getting smaller and smaller, and not having to have a pretty heavy thing on your face. And I think we're already seeing some of that on the mix between AR and VR. I think that's going to be really where the industry is going towards, to remove a little bit that heavy aspect of really getting people to wear something, to, oh, it's just a small little goggle. It's your
Mhm.
sunglasses that you have, which nowadays we have the Meta Quest, and not the Meta Quest, the Meta sunglasses and so forth. So I think like it's going towards a smaller hardware, because everything is getting smaller nowadays, and
True.
we're able to support that. Um, and from use, I think people are gonna more and more see uses not only on design aspect, but from a construction perspective. It's how we can bridge the virtual with the real world. And I think that's where we're going to be seeing the industry moving towards. How can we better connect the two? And I think we already have the view through in some of the goggles around the market right now that has been quite helpful to create that bridge. And I joked around the Apple Vision, but at the end of the day, it's a pretty interesting advance in the industry, because you're even removing the remotes, right? So you can start actually
Mhm.
manipulating things with only fingers, and that's making things even more accessible at the end of the day. So I think that's where we're going towards, and I'm quite excited to see how we are evolving in that sense.
Yeah. In your opinion, what would make VR even more valuable to you in the future?
I think it wouldn't even be on the VR side, it's on the rendering part. And I think that's a little bit on what's happening on making rendering a lot more fluid. So you can very easily, I think, like Revit is not a platform that looks pretty good once you're trying to just go directly from Revit to VR. So you need that extra step to get to a more usable, if you can call it that way, presentation style. So this is a little bit on where I see um, getting renderings to be a lot quicker and better quality without a lot of input in that sense, and like manual work to get to the level. And that's where AI comes into play a little bit, into bridging that gap between what we have in the Revit side, moving into VR, but in between we have an agent or a platform that is supporting the upscaling of materials and getting VR a lot quicker. I think that's kind of
Mhm.
like trying to minimize um, the time needed to support VR.
I see. And what would you say, Victor, to firms, architecture firms like yours, who are still hesitant to try VR?
I think like VR has a right place and time. If you just use VR for the sake of using VR, it's not bringing the value, and I think that's where sometimes the companies fail on the adoption per se, because they, oh, we just want to use for the sake of using it. You have to use with purpose, and that's where it comes down to, what are the main things that you wanted to resolve with VR. It's not necessarily just for the sake of using it. You need to resolve something. What's the issue you're having, and how do you want it to resolve with VR? I think that's kind of like, if you are able to define that, that will make implementation a lot easier, because it's going to be easier for you to sell up to your leadership team, and they will better understand. Your clients will better understand as well, because they will see the issue that they had before and you're trying to solve with VR. So I think it's really define what the issue is, and then
Mhm.
from there you can start on better understanding how VR can support that implementation and the
Yeah,
that resolution.
that's great. Yeah, wow. Food for thought, lots of great insights from you. We are coming to an end now, but before we end, I would like to ask you one last question. So, if you were able to summarize the value of VR in one sentence, what would it be?
It's always hard. I think like it's pretty interesting technology, but I'll probably say the summarizing everything is providing people access to information before it's actually built. I think this is really um, the summarization of VR, because a lot of the times we, as humans, I'll probably say architects, might have a little bit more visual on understanding how things will look like, but most of the people, they don't really have that visual, and be able to see that before it's built so you don't have to redo. That's the beauty of VR. So you can fill the space, you can understand how it's going to be, and you can make changes before it's too late, and you have to spend a lot more money after that. So
Brilliant. Yeah. Wow. So I just would like to thank you very much, Victor, for your time, for sharing your experience with us today. Yeah, it has been a great pleasure. Is there anything else you want to say? If you want to close this, just feel free.
no, I really wanted to thank you for the invite. I think it's quite nice to share around the industry. The industry, sometimes we try, or we are very close, and this is the only way that we can grow as an industry and support each other. Um, so really thank you for the invitation. And if anyone wants to reach out, feel free to reach out as well after, and we can definitely talk about it. But thanks, Rejani, for the invite.
No, thank you. Thank you, Victor. And for everyone watching us today, I just want to let you know that if you want to know more about Julio and VR for architecture, just feel free to get in touch. We are going to be really happy to help, and it will be a pleasure for sure. That's all for today then. Thanks, Victor.
Awesome.
Thank you very much. Speak soon.
Thanks,
Yeah,
everyone. Talk
thanks.
later. Bye.
Bye.